Hello and welcome to part 2 of our study of the Katha Upanishad from Eknath Easwaran's beautiful English translation in this collection here. Last time we began our study of the Katha Upanishad by setting up the scene. It's a classic dialogue like the Bhagavad Gita, written a few centuries later than this, where the spiritual aspirant, the seeker, finds the ascended master, the teacher. In this case, it is a teenage boy, 12, 13, 14 years old, named Nachiketa, who goes to visit the Lord of Death, Lord Yama, to ask Death this question: what happens after you die? I mean, if anybody knows, you know, right? And Lord Yama tries to squirm out of it, but basically Nachiketa talks him into it, and thus begins the Katha Upanishad. And we get to listen into their discussion, kind of read over their shoulders. And we then too are taken into one of the most profound dialogues in all of world wisdom literature, let alone Hinduism. Everybody's favorite Upanishad, the Katha Upanishad. So let's get back in. So Lord Yama has been explaining to Nachiketa about the self. And I know it's confusing in English, but in the text, when you're reading it, it's capital S, self, meaning, again, the Atman, the universal consciousness that inhabits all sentient beings, and self-realization, or realizing my oneness, transcending my small self-will, my small ego, and coming into the grander, boundless realization of oneness with the all that is. That's called self-realization. And when one realizes that, Lord Yama is trying to pitch to this kid, death doesn't have a grip on you anymore. Death is going to happen to your body, but the Atman, the self, is unborn and undying. So in a way, in a kind of a roundabout way, you might say, Lord Yama is answering Nachiketa's core basic question. Look, is there life after death or not? And the answer is yes and no. So let me go on. This is Lord Yama continuing his teaching to the boy, not Nachiketa. Lord Yama says, let me start up here. Hidden in the heart of every creature exists the self, the Atman. Subtler than the subtlest, greater than the greatest. They go beyond all sorrow who extinguish their self-will, the small will, the ego, and behold the glory of the self, capital S self, the Atman, through the grace of the Lord of love. Oh, now we have a new phrase, the Lord of love, the kind of a personified idea of God. Yama goes on, when the wise realize the self, formless in the midst of forms, changeless in the midst of change, omnipresent and supreme, they go beyond sorrow. The self cannot be known through study of the scriptures, nor through the intellect, nor through hearing discourses about it. So sorry, watching this YouTube video is not going to bring you to full realization of the self, but it's a start. Let me continue. The self can be attained only by those whom the self chooses. Verily unto them does the self reveal himself. Oh, this is interesting. So you can't hunt down the self, bag it, and drag it home. There's a sense in which all you can do is ready yourself and then it chooses you. This reminds me so much of the Christian mystics. I'm reading a lot of Thomas Merton lately, and he's such a great student of the medieval mystics, St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila and Meister Eckhart and the unknown author of The Cloud of Unknowing, and all of the great Roman Catholic Christian mystics say that in contemplative prayer, you don't, drag yourself up the mountain and pound down the door and finally meet God. All you can do in contemplative prayer, the Christian mystics say, is empty yourself out, make room, get ready. It is God who finds you, not you who who find God. That's the language, a sort of a passive language in Christian mysticism that we just heard here in the Katha Upanishad. The self can be attained only by those whom the self chooses. Reminds me of that Indian phrase, that's a cliche that we often hear in the West, that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. You can back up a dump truck full of truth and dump it in front of a student who's not ready, and nothing happens. So maybe all we can do as students is ask ourselves, not where is the truth, but how can I prepare myself, empty out and ready myself to receive what is probably already raining down on me? To go on, Lord Yama continues, he says, the self cannot be known by anyone who desists not from unrighteous ways, controls not the senses, stills not the mind, and practices not meditation. And as we learn in Ashtanga Yoga too, there's some work you need to do to get ready. Stop being a jerk. Start treating people like the way you want to be treated. Moral rectitude. Be kind, be loving, be compassionate, be moderate in your sensory intake. Start to moderate yourself. Pull back a little bit from the undisciplined life. Practice meditation. Still the mind. Those are some of the ways in which we prepare ourselves for what will be revealed in the depths of our preparation. Lord Yama goes on, none else can know the omnipresent self, whose glory sweeps away the rituals of the priest and the prowess of the warrior and puts death itself to death. Yeah, when this realization of Brahmanatman, of the self, comes, it sweeps away the rituals of the priests. Interesting little tension there between spirituality and religion. It's not one or the other. It's just the deeper insight that, go ahead and keep going to Mass. Do the Eucharist. That is a path to the sacred. That is a path to the divine. But God, or the self, or ultimacy, is beyond all ritual, because it's beyond all forms, all constructs, all thoughts, beyond even the concept of experience. The wordless realization the mystics of all the traditions take us to. Lord Yama goes on. Basically, this passage is about there being two selves. So this is a little bit, again, of that Samkhya, or dualistic perspective that creeps into the Katha Upanishad. Yama says, in the secret cave of the heart, two are seated by life's fountain. The separate ego drinks of the sweet and bitter stuff, liking the sweet and disliking the bitter, while the supreme, capital S, self drinks sweet and bitter, neither liking this nor disliking that. The ego gropes in darkness while the self lives in light. So declare the illumined sages and the householders, and regular people who worship the sacred fire in the name of the Lord. May we light the fire of Nachiketa that burns out the ego and enables us to pass from fearful fragmentation to fearless fullness in the changeless whole. So there are two of us. There's the private ego. There's the Peter Boland me that has ambitions and fears and wants what he wants, and etc. Goes through all the struggles and gets his feelings hurt and all that stuff. And then there's the deeper me, the self, the capital S self, which is, according to that passage, not driven by desires. It just is still and full in its stillness, and doesn't go running toward pleasure and running away from pain and all that sort of ordinary stuff that my ego life is all about. So here's another passage from the Katha Upanishad, one of the great images, the image of the chariot and the metaphor of the chariot, which, by the way, many centuries later, or a few centuries later, I should say. We don't know exactly when this was written, but a few hundred years later in Athens in the 5th century BCE, Plato writes a dialogue called the Phaedrus, in which he describes the soul as a chariot being pulled by two horses. We won't get into Plato's analogy here, but this is a very similar passage where our life is compared to a chariot. Look at how Lord Yama lays this one out. It's a bit more complex than Plato's analogy. Lord Yama says, know the Atman, the self, as Lord of the chariot, the owner of the chariot. The body as the chariot itself, the discriminating intellect as the charioteer, holding the reins, and the mind as the reins. The senses, say the wise, are the horses. Selfish desires are the roads they travel. It's a pretty involved metaphor, isn't it? When the Atman is confused with the body, mind, and senses, he seems to enjoy pleasure and suffer sorrow. When a person lacks discrimination and his mind is undisciplined, the senses run hither and thither like wild horses. Yeah, it's going to be a mess. But they obey the rein like trained horses when one has discrimination and has made the mind one-pointed. The word discrimination here has none of the racial overtones that we mean these days when we talk about discrimination and anti-discrimination. Discrimination is simply, maybe the word discernment would be better. It means intellectually telling the difference between this and this. Discriminating between mayonnaise and sour cream, although they kind of look the same from a distance. But when you experience them, they're quite different. You make a distinction. That's discrimination in this sense, yeah? Okay. So those who lack discrimination with little control over their thoughts and far from pure reach not the pure state of immortality, but wander from death to death. Again, reincarnation. But those who have discrimination with a still mind and a pure heart reach journey's end, never again to fall into the jaws of death. With a discriminating intellect as charioteer and a trained mind as reins, they attain the supreme goal of life, to be united with the Lord of love. There's that Lord of love phrase again. That's what's so, I think, beautiful and multifaceted and rich about Hinduism. There's this constant kind of loving synthesis between analytical, rational discourse and poetic, metaphorical evocation. And what is evoked is just as powerful as what is declared and proven with reason. And so to move sort of seamlessly between philosophical discourse and devotional, loving, theism, talk about deities in that way, that's, to me, really rich. And to others, it's just confusing. It's like, pick one, right? Pick a team. Are you a theist or are you moving in non-theistic ways? And the Hindus are like, yes, we're doing all of that at the same time. So strap in and hang on. Lord Yama goes on, he says, the senses derive from objects of sense perception, sense objects from mind, mind from intellect, and intellect from ego, and ego from undifferentiated consciousness, and consciousness from Brahman. There's like this whole descending waterfall. Brahman is the first cause and last refuge. Brahman, the hidden self in everyone, does not shine forth. He is revealed only to those who keep their minds one-pointed on the Lord of love, and thus develop a superconscious manner of knowing. Meditation enables them to go deeper and deeper into consciousness, from the world of words to the world of thoughts, then beyond thoughts to wisdom in the self. I'm going through this Katha Upanishad with you, almost line by line. I'm not skipping hardly anything because I can't figure out what to remove. Every line is so perfect. That's why these videos are getting a little longer than I thought they were going to be. That's okay. Lord Yama goes on, get up, wake up, seek the guidance of an illumined teacher and realize the self. Sharp like a razor's edge, the sages say, is the path, difficult to traverse. Yeah, the razor's edge. There's the title of the great Somerset Maugham book and a number of different Hollywood films with the same name. The razor's edge. You know, it reminds me of Jesus's line in the Sermon on the Mount that narrow is the gate to righteousness and wide is the gate to unrighteousness. You know, that idea of like shooting arrows at a target. You know, there's the bullseye where you get it right, and then there's all the ways around it, ways to get it wrong. So the razor's edge, that's a narrow path. You can fall off this way or that way with the slightest misstep. This is what poetic teaching does. It puts into visceral metaphors the razor's edge. It's a really powerful term. It just reminds me how, like the Bible, the Katha Upanishad has been beloved by readers for thousands of years. It's one of the first books that Ralph Waldo Emerson read from the Hindu tradition, the Katha Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, and passages from other texts like the Vedas. But that's how it got into Emerson, and through Emerson into American consciousness. So I'm struck when I read passages like that in their original setting that become so influential later through other sources. Lord Yama goes on, the supreme self is beyond name and form, beyond senses, inexhaustible, without beginning, without end, beyond time, space, and causality, eternal, immutable. Those who realize the self are forever free from the jaws of death. So he's answering the kid's question, really. And he's framing it as a path towards self-realization. Yama goes on, the wise who gain experiential knowledge of this timeless tale of Nachiketa, narrated by death, attain the glory of living in spiritual awareness. So there Lord Yama steps out of the story and says, hey y'all, anybody reading this down the centuries, like you and me? You too now have a doorway into this deeper realization. And those who, full of devotion, recite this supreme mystery at a spiritual gathering are fit for eternal life. They are indeed fit for eternal life. So apparently Lord Yama is smiling down upon our experience here as I read through this and as you go through this with me through this video. Let me move into a different section here now. He says, there is a city with 11 gates. Let's pause. What does that mean? There is a city with 11 gates. He's talking about the body. Let's count the gates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is my navel. 9, 10 down there. And 11 is right at the crown of the head in the fissures between the skull when you were born that were kind of open, that closed back together. The highest chakra. So those are the 11 gates. So when you see that wonderful phrase, there is a city with 11 gates, it's talking about the human body. There is a city with 11 gates of which the ruler is the unborn self, the Atman, whose light forever shines. They go beyond sorrow who meditate on the self and are freed from the cycle of birth and death, for this self is supreme. The self is the sun shining in the sky, the wind blowing in space. He is the fire at the altar and in the home of the guest. He dwells in human beings, in gods, in truth, and in the vast firmament. He is the fish born in water, the plant growing on the earth, the river flowing down from the mountain, for the self is supreme. The adorable one who is seated in the heart rules the breath of life. Unto him all the senses pay their homage. When the dweller in the body breaks out in freedom from the bonds of flesh, what remains? For this self is supreme. We live not by the breath that flows in and flows out, but by him who causes the breath to flow in and flow out. I remember once in a meditation teaching I went to, in a yoga teaching, the teacher said something I'll never forget. She said, we were working on our pranayamas and our asanas, our poses and our breathing. And she said, let's work on our breathing now. And she said, when you're breathing, don't consciously breathe. Instead, allow yourself to be breathed. Allow yourself to be breathed. The hair on my arm still stands up when I think about that, because that was an enormous insight for me. Because egoically, we all think that we run around and we do everything, and I built that, and that's my this, and that's my that, and I, me, all this I, me, and mine talk. And when you stop and realize that there is a very real sense in which I am the presence of the cosmos. I am a form of the formless Brahmanatman. And I am not living my life. My life is being lived. Brahman is living through me. Or to shift to the theistic language of the Christian mystics, it is God in me, as me, that is even having these questions. So this is the great perennial wisdom, the great perennial philosophy of oneness, of meeting ultimacy that we see bubbling up through the ground of the Katha Upanishad. I've got a few more passages for you. Let's save those for part 3 of the Katha Upanishad. See you on the other side.